Hello everyone, welcome to the CoreStream GRC and SANNOS webinar. We're here to talk about moving beyond AI chatbots into the intelligence-first GRC your board can trust. I'm Lucy Montague, Head of Marketing here at CoreStream GRC, and I'm joined by two GRC experts who I'd love for them to introduce themselves. So Paul, tell us a bit about yourself and your background. Oh, Paul, you're on mute.
Thank you very much for first error. Um, so at CoreStream, I'm responsible for the GRC strategy. That's all about everything we do in the marketplace and how do we understand what is going on. And this is born out of my experience from a GRC perspective. Prior to joining CoreStream 4 years ago, I was actually at Deloitte for 19 years. I was a partner in their risk advisory business. And before that, I was at EY. So through and through, focused on GRC, helping organizations address their GRC challenges and drive everything from a value-based perspective.
Lovely, thank you, Paul. And Anders, can you tell me a bit about your role and your background?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lucy. Well, my name is Anders Søborg. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of SANNOS. I have a background not that different than Paul, 25 years working within the world of GRC, having been a chief risk officer in two global companies struggling to overcome the workload, both when it comes from internal risk and compliance and controls, but also from third parties such as Barclays and Citibank. And the last two roles before SANNOS, I was partner in EY for GRC and TPM, and the same in PwC.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got lots of Big Four knowledge, and then we've also got the Chief Risk Officer perspective as well. So this should be a great conversation. To begin with, before we dive into AI, I just really want to strip back and get back to basics with governance, risk, and compliance, and think about ultimately what it is we're all trying to achieve in the day to day. So we asked our customer community to rank a various number of different attributes as to what truly meant success for them in their day to day. And the first came out as risk reduction, and the second was business value creation and stakeholder trust. So these kind of metrics and these outcomes that businesses are looking to achieve with governance, risk, and compliance are incredibly important. Paul, we'll start with you. Can you tell me a little bit more about either one of those attributes from a customer perspective? What have you been hearing about, and what does this truly mean for them?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, for all the various organizations I speak to, I think they're both intrinsically linked. Risk reduction is not just about enterprise risk, it's about just the wider context of risk. So, for example, if you're not complying or you're not absolutely completely sure you're complying with a given set of standards or regulations, you're also taking risk. So for me, this is about organizations wanting to make sure the risks, the external factors, and the internal dimensions are being managed. That's including being able to demonstrate compliance, but also being able to do that without hindering the business achieving its objectives. So often, obviously, generating revenue and generating profit. So for them, it's about how do we do that in the most efficient way. And quite often, one of the challenges I hear is an increasing level of stakeholder expectations, whether that's the executive or outside shareholders and regulators, but also capacity constrained in terms of every GRC function is not huge in any organization, no matter the size, and ultimately. It's how can they make sure they're generating that value, reducing risk, generating that value within a resource constrained set of functions. And that is absolutely the kind of flow of every conversation I have.
Lovely, thank you. And Anders, over to you. From a chief risk officer perspective, stakeholder trust, what does that truly mean? Who are you having to talk to? Who are you having to win over in those board discussions?
I think when you sit in a chief risk officer role or a head of risk management or compliance or control function, your stakeholders are multiples. You have from the executive management often, where you have to be precise and short and compromise, but also ensure they kind of trust and has the knowledge of the state of the nation in your company when it comes to risk and compliance, towards people working in first line or operations, basically, whether it's financial control reporting, or whether it's third-party risk in supply chain, or regulatory risk within legal. You need to manage all those stakeholders. And unfortunately, what often happens, and this is also what I've seen and experienced myself, that is that your team is so resource constrained that they hardly manage to overcome the traditional compliance and control cycle, which also means, unfortunately, for many teams, that they're being looked at as checkers rather than strategic advisors. I remember myself as CEO telling me, now, Anders, you're giving me this fantastic overview across our business globally, for even including our commercial angle and overlooking our biggest clients, but how are you going to help me fix it? Which obviously you have your kind of limits what you're allowed to do as a second line function, but nevertheless, there was some truth in that. That being that teams are spending way too much time on looking down and checking and following up, rather than actually support the mission they're there to support, that being drive risk reduction, transformation, and guiding the organization. So for me, that's the absolute key thing here, that too many teams are basically drowning in manual work.
Lovely. So it's like the practicality of it, as well as the more high level risk register and what that truly means for the business. We always like to go back to OSEG's definition to really just cement what it is we're doing here. So GRC is a capability to reliably achieve objectives. That's the governance piece, address uncertainty, the risk management, and then act with integrity, compliance. So we then spoke to a variety of our customer community and asked them about their daily challenges. And let's just say there's a fair few that they need to contend with in their day-to-day. Paul, we'll begin with you again. What is kind of singing out to you? What are you talking about in your customer conversations?
Yeah, I mean, and you can see that through some of these themes coming through here. If we to kind of put them into a few buckets, you've got that challenge on resources, you've got that demand in terms of being able to assure everything and reduce risk and so forth. And so if I think about a few examples, organizations that are multi-jurisdictional, so a big enterprise will wherever it's headquartered have those obligations on it in terms of those top-down elements. Then for each of the jurisdictions, so countries, in terms of where they operate, they'll have local regulations, particularly obviously depending upon the industry, but those that are much more in the business to consumer space, even more impacted with local regulations. And then you've got the cross-cutting dimensions as well. So for example, things like the various different IT standards and expectations. And so all of those things combined means that there's all of these overlaps of things they need to be assuring themselves, as well as running the business. And you can see that coming through here in terms of a number of those themes. And to me, those are getting greater by the year because of the demands and the budgetary challenges, as well as the demands in terms of workload. So that's an absolute focus area for organizations in terms of addressing those.
Thanks, Paul. And just to let the audience know, we've just released our first poll, so you can have your say into what is causing you your biggest challenges. And as from your perspective, when you were working in Big Four and EY, what were the things that were calling out to you then, and what is still consistent today with the biggest challenges?
I think when you look at it, there's a lot around resources, but also knowledge and scarcity of the same. Regulations are developing faster than ever. Some of the regulations we've seen primarily in Europe, but also in other territories, is being strengthened faster than would be fair to consider a normal person to be able to keep up with, leaving either you with the option to not do anything about it and risking your company and your colleagues, or give up or use external advisors. So that is definitely one of the challenges I've seen, the regulatory development of regulations, which can be extremely difficult to cope with. On the other hand, when you know the regulation, then comes the time when you have to do something about it, which can be exhausting when you're already worked out and basically out of resources. So I do see those two things as the key challenges in today's GRC environment.
Very good. So we've spoken about the overlapping of various different frameworks, the need to provide more evidence more often with less time, the fact that budgets are getting smaller, teams are getting smaller. There's an expectation of there's AI now, so plug that in and make that work, but no real kind of clarity around how to do it effectively and knowing what to trust and where your data's going, alongside board expectations and just general insights and news headlines and staying on top of all of that. So it's no wonder that so many businesses have implemented AI in various different ways across various different tech stacks and departments, and individuals have got their own ways of doing it to try and combat and firefight against all these different challenges. But Anders, what are you, because obviously you've created an AI system, but what was it that you were seeing with the existing AI tools that made you think, no, I need to create something better?
Well, I think one of the drivers was quality, not speed. Most teams have used some sort of a chatbot, which are absolutely fine for the purpose of chatting. Unfortunately, they're unreliable, run out of memory, and are not trained in the skills of GRC professionals. And that's exactly what we saw and what we're trying to continuously improve and support a skilled AI solution fit for purpose, a solution where you can trust your company's compliance or control maturity assessment, and not just a chatbot giving you randomly questions which are fluctuating from day to day. And that's what we set out to do as a company.
So these generic LLMs that are hallucinating, I was reading one of your reports and it said that between 50 and 60% of the output might not be accurate because there is just that hallucination and the lack of expertise behind what your generic AI bots are producing from a controls perspective, audit findings perspective. They just don't have that knowledge there.
No, and you can say, why is that? Well, if you look at how LLM models are built, they're very much built on public available information, and is confidential information around GRC inside companies public available information which can be used to train LLM model? No. And that's one of the reasons. But there are many more. One being that chatbots' key objective is to answer you, whether it's right or wrong. I myself recently, and I am using chatbots. I love them. You should just use them for the right purpose. But within last week, I've several times have these chatbots basically saying they have done an analysis, and then when you asked it to confirm, they're turning 180, saying, no, I actually didn't do it. I just wanted to give you a report that you asked me to do. And that's not what you want, nor what I'm using, of course, myself for control or compliance. And it's also something we hear over and over again from some of the users of newer GRC platform, that the chatbot functionality is simply wasteless when it comes to control and compliance work.
Yes, because they're built to essentially make you happy, make you want to come back. So they will say what it is that they think you want to say, and you will get that agreed answer, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. So you're looking for that AI tool that's going to challenge and produce the best outcome for you, as opposed to just what you want to hear in your sort of echo chamber of, this is going so well, we're absolutely fine, let's crack on.
Absolutely. Okay. And absolutely. And just one recent experience I had was with one of our clients, a skilled compliance expert, where he had used our solution to do a review related to one of the regulations for financial services, that being DORA, where he turned to me and say, how can I explain this to the board? I already used an external advisor analyzing this. And I was saying, well, now you know the truth. Then it's your job as a human in the loop actually to go to management and say, no, we are not close to 100. We're probably closer to 66% compliance. But isn't that what you rather would know than going with biased data and taking decision based on biased data? And that's the thing. A skilled AI solution at ours is not a match function. It's a reasoning engine that comes with the insight, which allows you to take the decision and drive the decisions with the leaders within your company. And you don't do that with chatbots.
Very good. So let's move into SANNOS and go a little bit further into more detail, because Michael Rasmussen, who belongs to GRC 2020, who coined the term governance, risk and compliance, he actually introduced CoreStream to SANNOS because he thought that it would be a good fit. He was part of your beta testing, wasn't he, Anders, and has kind of supported along the way?
Yes, Michael has been a great support. I think instantly when we showed Michael our solution around the time when we launched the first beta version, he was recognizing how we are transforming and digitalizing something the market has been screaming for and needing for years. So it's been an absolute joy and pleasure to having him as a sounding board over the time. Also, of course, spreading the word around what we do and also the difference. So yes, you're right, Lucy.
And then can you give some more context and detail around your relationship with Secure Controls Framework?
Absolutely. Well, Paul mentioned before the challenges quite a few organizations have with having to comply with multiple frameworks, which especially comes into play when it comes to cyber and information security. Secure Control Framework, just really quickly, is the leading multi-framework framework. And what does that mean? That means that a set of cyber experts across the world, one of the leaders within the Secure Control Framework is named Tom Cornelius. They, some years ago, set out to build a multi-framework, which basically means that within the Secure Control Framework, you have more than 1,500 controls, allowing you to cross-map to 250 plus frameworks. And he found us. And why did he find us? He basically found us because he had been looking for reliable AI for years, not a smart user interface with a chatbot, but something you could trust without false positives and hallucinations. So Tom Cornelius and the Secure Control Framework got us certified in the US by the Cyber AB, which is the body that also certifies technology that are to be used for information security assessments related to all contractors to the US Department of War. Tom did, and the Secure Control Framework did test more than 3,000 pages of evidence run through our solution for analysis without finding any false positives nor hallucinations. Wow. So it's both an honor being used and promoted by the Secure Control Framework, but it's also a benefit for people using us that they have access to that.
Very good. And then your relationship with KPMG.
Thank you. KPMG is a different story. We built our solution to be reliable. And we all know the reliability of Big Four. They have a huge quality standard, and they're born out of quality. And we wanted our solution to fit into that. So you can say one of the drivers behind our quality level is that we wanted our SANNOS to be so strong that even Big Four would use it for audit, so for assurance work, and that's exactly what KPMG are doing. So we are incredibly proud that they are our first of the Big Four who joined, while others are hurrying to catch up these days. But yes, KPMG are using our solution these days.
That's the rubber stamp that you want, isn't it? When KPMG say it's okay, it's good to go.
That's what we think. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then we're going to move in, Anders, if you can just sort of talk to the kind of like before using SANNOS. So what did the day-to-day look like for the average GRC professional versus when they begin to use your AI system?
Absolutely. Well, you might find it weird. Why do I see a screenshot of tons of documents lying around here? Well, basically, that's most likely everyone who's looking at this recording's daily life. Sorry. While you have GRC platforms where you have workflows, risk assessment, when it comes down to doing the compliance analysis, control testing for financial controls, it's left with you, and you meaning human. And that's what we wanted to change. So if you look at before and after, you're basically getting 80%, not 100%, human in the loop, always automated of the complex control or compliance assessment work. And that's really the core of our solution now being integrated in CoreStream GRC.
Lovely. And then you have these 5 points here. So, and just before we dive into that, Anders, I'm really curious to know, as marketer for CoreStream GRC, why did you choose us to be your GRC platform to integrate with globally?
Well, it might seem not an easy answer, but it actually is, Lucy. As I mentioned before, we were set out to make the life of GRC professionals easier with what doesn't exist in traditional GRC platforms. Unfortunately, what does exist in traditional GRC platforms is a very long time to value, meaning from starting up to getting implementation, it can take months, not with CoreStream. Secondly, a lot of platforms are imposing a standard, not considering the processes or operating model of your organization. And CoreStream does the opposite. And that was basically the drivers behind teaming up with CoreStream. Your flexibility and your time to value. It fits perfectly with our strategy and our objective. So it was an actual match. And here we are.
Paul, I'm going to ask you the same question in reverse because I remember you ringing me after you first met Anders and you just seen the SANNOS system and you spoke about the Big Four background and how much it resonated with your own. Can you talk a little bit more to that and what else you thought when you first saw SANNOS?
So what immediately resonated with me was where GRC is going, and very rapidly as we get towards 2030, and that's the desire to add more intelligence into GRC, more automation, so that GRC professionals, and as I mentioned earlier on, GRC functions are generally some of the smaller functions in any big enterprise. And therefore those skilled people need to spend more time with kind of judgment and thinking about remediation and where everything's going to help the business achieve its objectives, rather than doing the mechanics of kind of assuring controls, demonstrating compliance to various standards. And it was the fact that this could achieve the intelligence layer to the quality and depth of accuracy that would be desired by GRC professionals, in a way which could meet all the various use cases and different operating models of organizations. I instantly saw the value in terms of how that would impact every single life of every single one of our clients.
That's
Thank you,
lovely.
Paul.
There's lots of patting on the back here, and we've got a number of different points around sustainability, risk control, all these different use cases, third-party risk management. But I'm really keen, if we can, Paul, to actually get into the demonstration so people can see what it is that we're actually talking about and what it means with this CoreStream integration.
Absolutely. Okay, right. Hopefully you can see my screen there.
Yes.
So this demo environment has been set up to strip back the kind of normal complexities of, say, a third-party risk solution or an end-to-end kind of controls management solution. So we've set it up to be able to do both elements at the same time. Now, fundamentally, when we're setting up an assessment, and I'll go to one that I've kind of already drafted here. So here, for example, this is a third-party assessment, and we're going to use a SOC 2. And I'm doing it against a particular entity. So this could be an internal entity if we were assessing the controls internally, or it could do with a specific system or a specific business unit or a division or the whole company. Or it could be a third party. So hence why we've set it up in this way. Now here we can select a full assessment or a partial assessment. If we're selecting a partial assessment, we can then pick kind of which areas are to be addressed within a SOC 2, for example. Likewise, if I was to pick internal control over financial reporting, you'd pick that particular area. We would then be able to pick kind of, is it purchase to pay, record to report, and so forth. And then we would attach all of the evidence that we wanted to be assessed. Now, if that's a third party one, that might be a SOC 2 report, or it might be you're asking the third party to upload various policies and procedural documentation and other evidence. If it's to do with internal control over financial reporting, we might be uploading actual reconciliations data or anything else from a financial reporting point of view. And we'll walk through a few different examples. Now, I've just shown that for the kind of creation of the assessment. Obviously, when we're sending a document like that SOC 2, so here's this SOC 2, it's a 56-page SOC 2 report. Many people will be familiar with these that are on the call. And so obviously that takes a few minutes for it to run through and then return the results. So for speed, I kind of have a few already then processed and pending review. So if we were to look at that particular SOC 2 one that I did there, so this is for the company Product Fruit is what we just saw there, SOC 2 against. And we can see here, that's the SOC 2 report I'd uploaded, and it's processed it. And it's come back with an average score of 33%, so partially compliant, with 5 compliant requirements, 40 mostly compliant, and 101 partially or non-compliant requirements. So let's delve into those. So first of all, I'll actually start with a mostly compliant as an example, and then we'll move back to a compliant to see the difference. We'll pick one at random. So for example, clearly define and document roles and responsibilities. So that's the control, that's the actual requirement within the framework with a clear objective about understanding segregation of duties in terms of the objective section that control sits under in the SOC 2. And so it's assessed that the document evidences roles and responsibilities through organizational charts and job descriptions. But it has identified gaps that it doesn't explicitly include or describe a role matrix, leaving it incomplete as per the requirement. Now, bear in mind, everything you're reading on screen right now was generated by that intelligence layer of SANNOS. Then it goes on to explain itself. So this is essentially giving you a full understanding as to how it is partially compliant, where it is compliant and where it is not compliant. So it goes on to explain, it describes the organization, the testing results, but it does contain explicit statements about documenting responsibilities, organization charts. You'll find those on page 21. It further evidences procedures to communicate roles and responsibilities through auditor inspection, page 31, and management review and approval of the org chart annually on page 31. So they support topic relevance, a specific documentation mechanism in terms of what is in there to meet the control. However, it doesn't include those role matrices in the provided excerpts with no explicit clause or description of the artifact. So it's essentially telling you it's partially or mostly compliant here, but this is the bit that's not. And so it will always give you, that intelligence layer will always give you the reasoning for and where the gap is. Pages where you will find the content. As a result of that gap, what the risk is. And you can then, as an organization, score that risk based on what you believe the impact is going to have on you, whether that's internally or as a result of a third party, depending on what we're assessing. And it'll suggest potential compensating controls we can consider. And then it will give us the full gap with the actionable recommendation as defined by the AI. So we've now taken that and been able to now then essentially turn that into an action that we're going to put in and track through to completion to remediate that deficiency, and then essentially go back through and reassess it again. Now, if I was to, so I said that was a mostly compliant, and it's the same with the partially. If I go to a compliant one, so security awareness and training, fully compliant, outlines the strengths. There's been no gaps identified, and it goes through and explains exactly about the fact that there's concrete training mechanisms, onboarding security and privacy training, and you can find all of that on pages 33 and 34. So it's telling you that that is exactly why I'm scoring it as a compliant. Now that's obviously to do with a SOC 2. Let's look at a couple of other ones. So in here, I've done a 27001 assessment. So if we were to look at the attachments, so in here I've got a business continuity plan, an ICT procedure, and an outsourcing document. We've got no compliant requirements, 2 mostly compliant, and then 91 partially or non-compliant requirements. So we'll just pick a partially, and we'll go against one of these, so protection against malware. So the same thing here, and it's telling you, now bear in mind, it's not a singular piece of evidence here. We've given it 3 pieces of evidence. And essentially, we've decided which is the relevant piece of evidence to demonstrate against which control automatically. So it's done that mechanical process. And then it's going to call out which document you will find the relevant evidence in to demonstrate partial compliance here. But it's also going to tell you the parts where it is not compliant in terms of what is missing. And the same again against the risks, the potential compensating controls, and the gaps. So that's obviously with procedural documentation. I'll do one final example here, and this is internal control over financial reporting. So here we're looking at one in the record to report process and intercompany. So we've put in a number of things around investigation logs, a general ledger extract, counterparty confirmations, and reconciliations. And so it's determined, because we're picking this against one specific control. So it's a partial assessment, we can see here, and we're focusing on the intercompany accounts must be reconciled at period end. So focusing on an individual control that is financial related rather than policies, procedures, SOC 2 reports. And so in the mostly compliant, it's then going to explain to us about the investigation logs demonstrates operating procedures in place in there in terms of the strengths. But there's a few different gaps. So period in reconciliation, matching to the counterparty records in terms of gaps. And we can see the same here in relation to obtaining counterparty confirmations and so forth. And so it goes through and explains the fact that the provided evidence supports intercompany difference are identified and tracked. However, evidence does not demonstrate full control requirement in terms of the reconciliations, no matching evidence to matching to the counterparty records as a bilateral agreement. And given the control is addressed operationally, but key required elements are missing, it's partially compliant. So it doesn't matter on the type of evidence, whether it's kind of much more kind of whether things are in place or not to meet a standard, or whether it's transactional evidence from financial transactions to demonstrate an ICFR control. It's all in there in terms of its ability to assess. And so from here, we can then essentially go into the whole piece of defining our action plans. And so here we would add an action, and we can then see that we're going to do that against define identification authentication procedures. So we can lift the text that was come back from the actionable recommendation and make some amends to it. We can then link it to the specific gaps that are coming through. So create a linkage, because we might have one action that we decide to do to meet multiple gaps. So then we're creating that then process record of this is what we're going to do to remediate and manage that through. So coming back to my resource constraints point is what this has done is done all of the mechanical process of assessing controls and assessing the evidence against the controls and against the standard, and it hasn't fatigued. You read a 100-page SOC 2 report, you get to page 20 and so on, and you start to fatigue and come back to it later. This will just process it in one go to the same standard, give you the gaps, and then you can turn that into your actionable recommendations in terms of those actions, which is where, in my view, GRC professionals should be focused on, is improving things and applying judgment and driving the strategic outcomes. The mechanical natures need to be automated, and this is exactly what that is doing. And obviously in this demo environment, we're sitting here with all the various different standards and regulations that we've loaded, working with SANNOS in terms of that intelligence layer. So we can see whether we're looking at EU CSRD with 2,368 controls underneath that element, or whether it's the full secure control framework at nearly 1,500 controls and so forth as we go down. All of these things are assessed based on the evidence that you upload.
Thank you, Paul. That was brilliant. And this is obviously an impossible question to answer because it's obviously dependent on the person. But from a time-saving perspective, in comparison to reviewing that SOC 2 report, reading it all through, finding the gaps, assessing it, adding the actions, all of that, how much time do you think you're saving through using SANNOS?
I think that's going to depend upon the function and how much of their role is more mechanical, if that makes sense as a statement, but easily 70 to 90% across second and third line functions. First line functions shouldn't need to do self-assessments anymore, because it's just upload the evidence that you've done something and it will basically process it. So in terms of the second and third line, they're then going to focus much more on that remediation piece and then the directional strategy of how do we make things just better within the organization. So absolutely. Now, the challenge for most organizations is they will only today be doing a percentage, a portion of what they truly want to assure. So they can compare like for what they do today, but they'll also probably be saying, we're looking at SOC 2 reports when they're coming from third parties, but we're resource constrained, so we basically page down quickly and look for any errors. So then your kind of comparability is not there, but at the same time your risk is going up because you're not reviewing that adequately. So what this would do is then actually reduce the risk. So without a doubt, and the evidence is there, is that you can absolutely reduce the amount of effort, but you can also cover a greater amount of desired areas you want to assure that you'll just be constrained today that you can't.
Saving time and also boosting confidence and assurance.
Absolutely.
A win-win. Anders, is there any possibility we could have a look at what else SANNOS is up to and what else will be coming down the tracks for the CoreStream integration?
Absolutely. I just want to maybe follow Paul in respect to most GRC teams, compliance team, they have a limited scope. What also happens often is someone at the exec level asks, why are we only checking financial controls when our heat map EAM report says that third-party risk or cyber is biggest? Who's actually keeping an eye on whether we are doing what we said we want to do in these policies? And that's the immediate benefits. We also see our clients, and very soon the clients of CoreStream GRC, starting small. Just pick one area, get some value. I can tell you the work will spread internally, and your colleagues will line up to get the heavy lifting of all the manual work done. But you're right, Lucy, we're not standing still. We set out to bring benefit of trusted AI to the teams within organizations, and especially those working within the broad spectrum of GRC. So absolutely happy to just share a quick glimpse of something we're working on, which also soon will be to the benefit of others. So let me see if I can share my screen. Now Paul has done such an amazing job. I think I can. There we go. Just checking that you can actually see my screen.
Got it, Anders.
So what you see here, it says SANNOS and it says AI GRC platform. It's not a full-fledged platform, but it's where we develop. People sleep. People have multiple jobs, both in GRC and in other platforms. So imagine you have SANNOS also overlooking all the data you have access to, all the user rights you have in your GRC system. So when you entered in the morning after weekend, or maybe on a Tuesday, as it will be tomorrow, you will have SANNOS have overlooked everything that has gone right and wrong since you had checked in the last time. And this is exactly what we will be bringing very soon, the SANNOS AI assistant with real-time recommendation. So what is that? Well, as I said before, it's basically SANNOS analyzing and giving proactive risk and gap scans, where it's not in the morning anymore, but actually when I logged in this morning, it says, good morning, here are all the things that has happened, and this is what you should be doing. But what it does bring, since I've set myself up as Chief Risk Officer, having overview of everything, it actually brings more than 200 insights for me, of course, based on dummy data. So what is an insight? Well, an insight could be, as you see here, multiple open issues within one topic. And is that hard? No, that's not hard. But what if SANNOS also brought you suggested action to dedicate a task force to resolve these overlapping security issues and develop a response plan? So what can you then do now instead of having to go in via outdated dashboards or trackers? Well, now you basically can jump straight into actually the review and the plan, not let AI take over, keep on the human in the loop, and you can go in and review and approve the plan. Now, what you see here is basically SANNOS' suggestion to a plan, where it suggests exactly what to do. First, it highlights the gap. Secondly, it summarizes a draft plan, which you can edit and change in terms of priority and due date. And lastly, it suggests 2 immediate milestones, including a timeline from today. And what you can basically do is to save this and allocate it, and then it flows into your traditional. So you're powering up basically your ability to work and drive change exactly as before, but here it's more analytics. And as you can see here, when I'm opening up the SANNOS AI assistant, you have quite a few different types of issues, which all are prioritized, which helps you also coming from something simple like a policy which has not been approved. It's only been drafted. It needs to go into the next step in your policy management flow, to mitigating sales drop, where it comes up with a suggested action, which you can then go to your head of sales or for the related business and discuss. You can, of course, also dismiss or disregard or do it manually, but why do it manually when you can get trusted AI to do that? Behind that, you have predictive insights in terms of failure rates, which is another topic, but also another very simple use case, and then I'll stop showing what will come in the future. That is when you're writing a risk. Let me actually go up to the risk or controls. When you're writing a new control, let's just say failure of business continuity due to lack of what? Well, as you can see now up here, SANNOS have been activated, and instead of spending time on completing the control description, I can select from a few recommendations, the ones I think that are relevant. apply them, and swiftly get to robust controls, which I can then store and put into a control flow. I can do exactly the same with risk and many other things, including building frameworks out of regulatory requirements. And that's basically what we're working on these days, with a lot of good people who knows what it is to live in the manual world of GRC. That's exactly what SANNOS brings now in a partnership with CoreStream GRC.
And Anders, I just had a question about the people behind SANNOS. So obviously yourself and your co-founder are ex-Big Four, but do you have other consultants who are also working behind the AI and building that intelligence layer?
Yeah, you don't get far without subject matter experts, Lucy. So yes, we do for some of the very complex frameworks around NIS2 and DORA, which a lot of people across Europe are struggling with, not only checking the overall compliance, but also checking operational compliance, as Paul alluded to before. We do have experts either in the team or associated. Many and most comes with a dual role. So nothing against Big Four. They have a fantastic development program and toolbox, but you also need the operational insight in terms of what works. And those are the types of individuals we work with and partner up with to deliver. Having said that, AI is fantastic if used right. So we do have a framework builder, which takes away weeks or months of work in building control or compliance framework. We did it manually when we started out. It was a heavy lifting to do that. And now we build frameworks. So Paul shared a list, quite comprehensive, of various frameworks we have. But the world of regulations and standards are vast. And if and when clients come to us, we can have new frameworks built in days rather than months, if they don't already have them themselves. So that was a long answer to a short question. I hope that was okay.
No, very comprehensive. Thank you very much. And we're now welcoming any questions from the audience. And I do actually have one here for Paul, which is around third-party risk management. So they use third-party risk management with CoreStream, and they're just wondering how SANNOS can help to enhance that capability.
Yeah, of course. So most third-party risk programs will be using external data sources of some kind to do the kind of external perspective, your sanctions, your adverse media, all of those kind of things. But what that's not giving you is, how is the organization operating? What controls do they have in place to help you? Ultimately, a third party is generally an extension of your own enterprise, particularly where they're providing services for you, where you've outsourced in particular. And so the normal way around this is, on top of the external data sources, we'll ask some questionnaires and we'll ask for some evidence. Now, again, we come back to the resource. Do we have, let's say we're onboarding 2,000 or reassessing 2,000 third parties a year, all that evidence against the questionnaires, do we get a chance to go through all of it? Not always. And what this will essentially do is we can either use standard frameworks like NIS2 or other areas, or we can define our own third-party risk framework and onboard it with SANNOS in terms of the platform, and essentially just say to a third party, we need X, Y, and Z policies, evidence of this, evidence of that, and anything else in relation to this list. They upload it, and essentially we get it processed, and that tells us how conformant they are to the third-party framework we've defined, or the standards we've selected from the kind of more common standards out there. And that's essentially going to give you the how compliant are they. We've done away with questionnaires, chasing the third party, because nobody likes answering 200 questions on a questionnaire. Everybody would just prefer to say, look, I've invested in all this procedural documentation, these policies, these SOC 2 reports, and so forth. I've invested in that. Use that, please. And so I know we do when we work with new clients or get reassessed, we'd much rather provide that than answer lots of questions. And so that's the game changer here in the third-party risk sense. So when we combine some of the other stuff we've got with the external data sources with then the that intelligence layer reviewing evidence, we just have then an unbeatable program and capability around third-party risk.
Which is another point in terms of CoreStream bringing value at the right time. Onboarding your suppliers, you don't have suppliers if they're not contributing to your value chain. So no one likes them sitting and stuck into a third-party risk management process. So basically, Paul, what CoreStream now enable is to shorten that time now tremendously, and get them to deliver the value to your organization that you want them to do, rather than have them fumbling around with questionnaires, because they simply just have to upload operational and evidence into the CoreStream platform.
Absolutely, and to me, that is what I always hear in terms of third-party programs. It's not just the kind of cost process of doing everything and chasing. It's that elapsed time which erodes business value of working with the third party or making that decision, because you've got the human element of constantly chasing and doing and reviewing content and evidence. And so if you imagine if you could do a complete due diligence from an external data point of view, request the evidence, assume the third party provides it same day. Within 24 hours, you've made a decision whether you're going to work with that third party or not, but also have the confidence you've done the total due diligence. That is a game changer for me.
And that leans back into the original point around business value creation as one of the success metrics.
Absolutely.
Very nice. We have another question here around kind of like the fear or the cynicism towards AI, and how do you combat against people pushing back and saying, no, we don't use AI at this company. But essentially, Anders, for you, how can you guarantee, or what protection, security things have you got in place for your consumers to make sure that their data is safe?
You're absolutely right. With not only with and after the AI Act in Europe and similar regulations around how to use AI the right way, companies need to be careful when they use AI. And we have put in place the relevant measures and have been approved by Big Four financial services and pharma, some of the most regulated and risk-averse businesses in the world. First of all, so I'll just mention a few of the measures. Our agents and AI doesn't learn anything. Point one, the data, of course, is stored in the region where you belong, Europe, US, and others. And you can change the retention period of your documents, how long time they stay within our solution. Our agents need the documentation to do the analysis. So those are some of the key information security features we have today. But we provide thoroughly information security documentation to all our clients. The other thing is, do you trust that an agent can do this? I would say most don't. So how do you overcome that? That you don't do that with writing down on PowerPoint or in Word documents that your solution works. We basically let them try it. I've had a CIO of an acknowledged financial services institution telling me in the first meeting, Anders, I do not trust that AI can do this. After the first proof of concept, he said, Anders, I want to do this and use SANNOS for everything. And then he keep pushing us with new frameworks and new use cases. And that's exactly how we do it over and over again. And that's also the best way. You cannot just rely on AI because someone says it's working. You should always do thorough due diligence, and we welcome that from all potential clients.
And with that in mind, because we are aware of the challenges and the kind of business cases that need to be built, so we do offer workshops with SANNOS, with Paul and with Anders, where you can bring your team into the virtual room, or we can come and meet you, and we can essentially go through your current processes and work out where's best to place AI and how to win the budget that you need and the stakeholder engagement with your CFO and your wider team. That's it for questions. We've got 5 minutes to go. So we've just launched our last poll just to ask, what's next. If you're looking for a workshop, a demonstration, some helpful resources, or the follow-up webinar that's to come once this release goes live, we're here to help. So please do get involved. Other than that, I just wanted to say thank you, Paul and Anders, for your time. You can find them on LinkedIn if you want to carry on the conversation. Otherwise, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.